Hello everyone. Today I am back at the very zenith of Windows 98 and the early beginnings of what was to become the early 2000s Windows XP era, characterized by its pixel shader trickery and like brown colored cover shooters. Um, so we're right at the split point of between those two eras. And we will look at one of the most stylized games of all time with a truly unique art style and feel to it. So this is Monolith's Tron 2.0. It's a game created as a spin-off title from the old Tron movies of the 80s that try to convey this whole computer thing to a generation that was first getting into contact with arcades and home computers and stuff like that. So Tron 2.0 was released in the early 2000s and was distributed by Buena Vista Home Entertainment. A fun fact about that is that Disney, who are still actually the owners of the Tron properties, created this Buena Vista Home Entertainment entity just for the sake of releasing this game, because at the time they wanted to be able to distance themselves from it if the game should tank in the market. So it's like safe to say that Disney didn't really trust neither the computer games market nor Monolith. So what is Tron 2.0 about? So the game is steeped in this computer terminology and references sometimes so obscure that not even a regular everyday computer user will understand them. So it's a geek game in the best sense of the word, and if you know software development and hardware and stuff like that, you will chuckle several times at the different humorous references in the game world. So the game's setting is that you play as Jet Bradley, who is the son of Alan Bradley of Tron fame, starting his new job at major software and research firm Encom. Now, in this company, there is a new device that can allegedly digitize people. So, playing around with that, our protagonist suddenly gets digitized. So, not entirely by his own making, mind you. And he's sucked into the central corporate computer system as a program. You see, he's summoned by this mysterious process called Matria, M-A-3-A, who is responsible for getting him in there in the first place. The system is facing a corruption from a computer virus that is replicating across the system and turning regular programs into malicious actors. So, in classic Tron fashion, all these programs are represented as people with names like Word.exe and General.com. And they walk around and talk and perform all of their assigned tasks. So it really captures this charming world inside the machine thing that was from the original movie. So the world itself in which you find yourself is a stylized one. It's very abstract in nature and very retro-futuristic with like large neon pillars and cuboid architectures. So this, of course, is in line with the theme. This world is ruled by the ever-watchful Colonel, get that pun, and his henchmen. So he sits in this tower and gathers information and monitors the system. So while he's not inherently evil, the Colonel and his cleanup programs see you as an intruder, as you are an unknown program in the system with a weird signature, since you are the only program that they know of, that they have ever seen, that is also a user. So they seek to terminate you, and they mistakenly see you as some part of the corruption. So your task is to navigate the system using typical computing constructs like ports and buses to transport yourself between different parts, and to avoid or eliminate not only the kernel's different sentinels but also the corruption and its green-tinted malicious process agents. So there is a lot of computing references in this world, and it's almost a game in itself to spot all of them. So the interesting thing is that this never feels like a gimmick. It's consistent and it's rational, and it makes sense from the perspective of the game world and the protagonist. So the presentation is also top-notch, with the world to this day looking unique and intriguing, and most of all it's gorgeous. So the story of the game is brought along using in-game cutscenes and by means of raiding different bins around the system that sometimes contain copies of emails that you can read. So this is a clever theme-fitting variant of the good old audio logs storytelling technique used in many other games. So in said bins you can also find subroutines, and this is a key element to the game, with the protagonist having a wheel of sorts onto which you can add software that runs continuously. You add your software to yourself, basically. So this software can be perks like higher jumps or greater armor, or it can be in the form of weapons that you can use. So in addition, the subroutines come in versions ranging from alpha to gold, and they can be upgraded. So sometimes if you are in contact with the corruption, your own character may become fragmented, and that makes blocks on this wheel unusable, sometimes leading to you not being able to fit your upgrades. But there is a defrag that you can run on yourself, with the trade-off that it takes time. So some add-ons that you find are also unknown, and they need to be ported. This is done by another always available helper ability. So you add things to the port program, and it ports these subroutines so that you can then use them as upgrades. This is a theme-consistent way of something like the identify spells in ARPGs. So the different ways to combine abilities and upgrades and weapons and stuff make for a rather deep customization system for your character, which adds kind of an RPG flair to this game while still remaining lightweight and like in line with the theme. So you can also find version upgrades around the game world that will upgrade your own general version number, which is akin to a leveling system. The RPG systems aside, Tron 2.0 is a shooter. The different weapons available range from like stealth type weapons to sniper rifle style armaments, and the key concept is that they all use energy as ammo. So energy is a resource that you can harvest from these little orbs that are scattered around the game world, but the kicker here is that energy is also used to scavenge the bins for new items, as well as to power up your subroutines. So this leads to you having to like strategically decide if you want to scavenge for something you need at the cost of reducing ammo for your weapons. The reason why this becomes very important is mainly due to the permissions. So much of the progression in the game is based around finding permission levels that are used to access things like ports and other areas or needed items, but searching for them consumes energy. So thus the strategic balance is always present, where you balance your own ammo is used also as a resource to search for things that you need. So you can't just go blasting away, because then you can't pick up stuff that you need. On the other hand, you cannot pick up everything at all times, because then you have no ammo for your weapons whenever you face harder opposition. The base weapon, however, is free to use, and that is the Tron staple of the disc. So this is an iconic thing in the original movie, as it also carries your program identity. So every program has a disc. Your disc can be thrown to inflict damage, or with the secondary function, which all weapons have a secondary function by the way, you can use the disc to block incoming discs that are thrown at you. So disc dueling is a key part of this game, and you need to practice this essential skill set. So the main multiplayer game mode is disc dueling as well. So if you want to become a land master in this game, you need to learn the ins and outs of this mechanic, and it's pretty deep actually. You can bounce the disc in different ways off the walls. You can recall the disc mid-flight to abort an ongoing throw, for example, but it takes time to return to you. There's also a way where you can use that to feint a throw to trick an opponent. Other standout weaponry is the stealth prod weapon and the energy beam sniper weapon with an insane zoom sight you can use. All this action aside, I would not say that Tron 2.0 is a straight up shooter, because it has a lot of RPG elements to it. It's also a lot about exploration, so even if there are plenty of suspenseful action-oriented duels with foes as well, it's a lot about exploring the environment. And the main thing here, however, is the game world and how it unironically manages to be all-in geek and computer terminology without it feeling like a gimmick. So it's clearly designed by people who love these things and who are also clever enough to trust that the player can understand even more hardcore references, or at least not be intimidated by them. On the technical side, the game was praised back in the day for the visuals and the world design. And that's rightfully so, I would say. So the stylized nature of the presentation makes it sort of timeless. Also, the famous Tron 2.0 glow effect was a big buzzword in the game's marketing, with Nvidia getting in on helping Monolith with this effect, creating a very early example of a post-processing pixel shader effect that adds the iconic fluorescent light radiating from the edges of objects. If you've seen the movie, you also know what that looks like. This required a compatible graphics card back in the day, and people much praised this effect. It still looks good actually, and it's also one of the few examples of a GPU manufacturer that helps to create a new way of rendering something specifically to cater for a specific game and a specific developer's needs. Performance-wise, it ran decently back in the day. Of course, this game runs on a version of LithTech, which is Monolith's famous game engine that also powers things like No One Lives Forever, Shogo, Aliens vs Predator, Sanity, Kiss Psycho Circus, lots of other titles of the time. In fact, Tron 2.0 uses a custom LithTech version that's called Triton, specifically tailor-made for this game. Later on, various features from Triton was back-ported into mainstream LithTech for the licensees of the end. So, like all LithTech games though, this one also suffers from issues with frame rates above 80 to 100 FPS, leading to slowdowns and massive stuttering. Thus, to play it now, you need to cap the frame rate somehow. It also has issues with RAM sizes above 4 GB and VRAM amounts larger than 1024 megabytes or so, but this was later patched in one of the post-release patches. Sadly, this was not patched for some reason for some of the older LithTech titles, making those other titles notoriously difficult to run on modern systems. LithTech at the time was universally praised for the ease of use of the game engine, though, and it contributed heavily to the technical mastery displayed in this game when it was combined with Monolith themselves being the ones using their own tools to create the game. So the geometry of the game is obviously not very complex, but the lighting and polygon counts of the characters are very impressive for the time. So the game, by the way, contains references to other Monolith games like Marathon, for example. There's a program in the game called Durandal.exe, which you should know that reference if you played Marathon. Speaking of graphical updates, I suppose everyone is familiar with the Light Cycle game from the Tron movie, or at least one of the video game adaptations of this, or like the many different Worm games of shareware discs of old and whatever, even Nibbles on Microsoft QBasic. The game is played by navigating an entity that emits a tail behind it and trying to turn in 90-degree angles so that you force opponents to hit your tail. This game featured as a very big thing in the original movie, and in the arcades of the 80s. The Tron game of the 80s arcades was this light cycle dueling, and it was deemed important enough to have its own updated version added to Tron 2.0. This update was created by lead developer Kevin Lambert, with the cycles being designed by industrial designer Syd Mead, who also created the designs for the original movie. So the light cycle racing feature in the storyline of the game and is a component in gameplay, but it's also a dedicated multiplayer mode for the game. In fact, I would argue it's one of the best multiplayer experiences ever by itself. So the updates to this whole light cycle racing formula include large 3D arenas, camera control, various power-ups that you can pick up, like the ability to smash opponent trails and drive through them with no damage to yourself. However, the 90-degree turning is still there. The development team for this game consisted of design lead and creative director Frank Rook, level designers Kevin Dedrick and Bill Vandervoort, and the engineering team, of course, under the lead of Kevin Lambert and senior engineers Brian Legge and Andrew Megowan. And interestingly, they also had a further person, John O'Rourke, who's currently at Valve, working with the NVIDIA FX custom effects, the glow effect, which was dubbed Screen Glow, the effect itself. Initially, multiplayer was not planned for the game, and only after discussions in the team it was added in the form of Laserdisc Duel and Light Cycle Racing modes. So, but the game itself was technically difficult to develop, and it was delayed before its initial planned release date, but that delay helped in allowing for the online modes to be added. So Kevin Lambert was very much a driving force in this, as he really wanted to experiment with online light cycles and various methods for faster online play at a limited bandwidth. So there was also a plan to add free roaming light cycles at some point, but it turned out to be awkward technically as well as gameplay wise, and it was scrapped. So personally I think that was the right choice, because the whole point of the light cycle lore is that they are locked to a grid, which is the arcade machine screen, and that they only turn at 90-degree angles. So I don't see how that would have worked as a free roaming thing. The first interviews also indicated that at one time there was an idea to have the computer world be simple in the beginning and low poly, only to become complex and higher poly at higher levels of the system. Yet this didn't make it into the final product for some reason, possibly because it was seen as like superfluous and not in line with the design they were going for, because at the later stages of the game, while still being gorgeous, they are for sure the same cuboid style as the earlier parts of the game. And Disney didn't really put that much input into the tech and development side. However, they did object to any inclusion of excessive violence and or adult references. So the game does in fact only show one single human being killed, and that is not even by the players doing. So any other combat is program to program, which ends with the program just being despawned or de-rest, as the game calls it. The development team, however, didn't really find any issues with that, because the team didn't really, the theme of the game didn't really need that. So the Tron 2.0 disc I would talk about earlier is another interesting thing, because it is an iconic Tron thing, but it was also a key weapon in Aliens vs Predator from the late 90s, which is also a Monolith game. So they did in fact have lit tech routines and structures specifically for that type of physics, and if you have played AVP, you can sort of feel a similarity between the two disc weapons, even if Tron 2.0 has a much more intricate system around the disc weapon. The game being on lit tech also means that it has publicly available development tools, so the modding scene has been around for a very long time, and it's actually in fact still thriving around the title. So the lit tech engine tools can be used even today to create content and patches and like levels for the game. So Disney initially though had discussions about a sequel or expansion for the game, but it did not happen. It sold decent, but not stellar, but it reviewed very well. So GameSpot, PC Gamer, other instances gave it favorable reviews, and they commended the mix of shooting and exploration, as well as the setting and world building. But player reception varied a lot, and some people felt the game world was weird and not like the action shooters that they were used to, while others loved all of these nerdy references and the game world. And it sold reasonably well for the year and was reasonably okay cost-wise to develop at 6 to 7 million. Not cheap, but still. So the fact that Disney didn't release a sequel is surprising. However, it never happened, and Monolith then went on to instead focus on The Matrix Online, which was to be the really big on MMOs was coming into becoming a really big thing, and the Matrix, of course, IP was huge at the time. Now we all know the Matrix Online flopped hideously, but they didn't know that back then. And of course, they also worked on what was to become the groundbreaking horror shooter known as Fear. So there is a newer Tron game from 2010 called Tron Evolution, but this third-person action game has no relation to Tron 2.0, and it's very lacking in comparison, especially in that it completely fails to capture the unique design and look of the world of Tron completely. It's very bland and boring, actually. So, seeing as we are never going to get a true Tron 3.0, probably, we would have to make do with replaying Tron 2.0, but that is not a bad thing, as the game is, as I stated, it's brilliant. And if you want to play the game today, you can obtain it from GOG or even Steam, I think. But you should be aware of the 100 FPS or so upper cap and the need to limit your frame rate for it to have functional gameplay. Apart from that, though, it should run reasonably well. And these days the super glow effects is of course possible on all GPUs, not only the then brand new NVIDIA FX tech, so you can enjoy that nice glow to things as you play. You can also play it on period correct hardware, and it's simple to get it to run on either Windows 98 or Windows XP. The captures here are taken from Windows XP running the latest patch level. All in all, I would say that Tron 2.0 is a very good classic game that effortlessly mixes some strategic thinking with shooting, and it has a very unique world that you will really feel immersed in if you have the right mindset for it. And it plays very well even today, with few games offering the same type of world building, meaning that even now you're hard pressed to find something that looks and plays quite like this. So therefore you should definitely give it a try. Thanks for listening to me, and I will be back shortly with more content.